All right, welcome everyone. We're going to start the meeting here. We'll give you a brief overview of what this CEQA NEPA scoping process is about. My name is Corey Lasso. I'm with DWR, and we have a contingency here with us to help us out. I'm going to start off on the presentation, and then Rhiannon Kucharski here, who's the lead planner for the Army Corps of Engineers, will follow up and wrap up the presentation. We have Dan Artho, who's the lead environmental. We have Shelley Amrine, who's the lead environmental compliance for DWR. Peter Blodgett, who's the lead engineer for the Army Corps of Engineers. And Charles Austin, who is the lead project manager for the Army Corps of Sorry about that, for the Army Corps of Engineers. So let's go to the next slide. So briefly, the overview of this project. What we're going to be talking about today is what exactly is the Sac GRR, Sac River GRR. We'll briefly go over the project area. We'll discuss the schedule of this project. Recently, we had an agency scoping meeting between DWR and the Army Corps of Engineers, and we'll go over a little bit of that. And then we'll talk about the public scoping process of this. And then we'll go over the requesting of public input from everybody here. And then it goes into the details of some of the planning stuff with the problems, opportunities, and so forth. And then we'll have closing comments. And after that, we'll open up the house to everyone so we can all, anyone who has questions can discuss some of the poster boards that we have out here. So with that, next slide. So what is the Sacramento River GRR? So this is based off of the Sacramento River Flood Control Project back from 1917. And we are looking to, the GRR stands for General Reauthorization Report. So we are basically looking to reauthorize what the Sacramento River Flood Control Project was done and what it can do for us in the future. So we'll get into that in a little bit of what that is. And this is going to be, we're looking to move it from just a system-wide focus of flood risk management and include in there ecosystem restoration capabilities for the project. The essence of this project is to get to, using core processes, to get to a chief's report, which that allows the federal government to authorize construction of a project. So that's the goal of what we're looking to get to. Then we can implement this and hopefully improve the flood control system that we have for the Sacramento River. The general project area it starts from Elder Creek, which is about 10 miles north of Chico, along the Sacramento River and its tributaries down to the confluence of the San Joaquin River. So that's the general scope of what the project's taking into account. The system includes levees along the main rivers, supplemented by overflow weirs and bypasses and reservoirs to help pass the water from up north down through to the south. So what is the current need for this project right now? Well, the original Sacramento River Flood Control Project was constructed back in the early 1900s. And as I was mentioning before, it had a single purpose of flood control. And the levees were placed very close to the rivers at that time frame. And the reason they did that was to flush the hydraulic debris that had been created previous to that. So that's one of the methods they were used in their designing. And also, when the levees were built, they were constructed prior to using modern methods. So the levee qualities weren't of the greatest standards. In the mid-1990s, like around 1950, reservoirs were constructed, which helped reduce the flooding. But during that same time frame, a lot of development occurred in the areas. So even though we had offset it by building reservoirs, we had increased how many people were living in the areas. And some of the issues that it created was the levee improvements were not able to keep pace with that urban development. And levees originally built to protect low-value agriculture were now eroding, and places that potentially could flood before, it isn't acceptable to have that flooding anymore. Higher velocities that were used with the rivers being closer with the levees being closer together, which were flushing the hydraulic mining, all that mining debris has already been passed through, so now we're getting higher velocities, and that's creating more erosion to the levees, so which creates a problem for us. Additionally, storms are much larger now than we originally anticipated back in the 1900s. So the system, when it was designed back then, was not designed for the storms that we now understand and occur. And additionally, we have the climate change factor of increased climate change, which increases the storm events. So since the construction of the Sacramento River Flood Control Project, our society has come to better understand the value of preserving our environment. As mentioned earlier, the Sacramento Flood Control Project was focused on flood protection and the levees, revetment reservoirs, and other factors of the Sacramento River Flood Control Project have significantly reduced habitat and natural ecosystem restorations. So previously, we didn't give as much attention to the ecosystem. And now, given our current climate and our better understanding of what's happening in the world and in our system, we're giving a lot more attention to that. Additionally, this project is looking to focus on a system-wide focus. Previously, most of the projects done since 1950 have been on a localized fashion. So this project is looking to take into consideration what has not been done, and consequently, if you look at our system, it's pretty much stayed the same way for the last 100 years. So history has demonstrated that systematic flood risk and ecosystem issues are inextricably linked and require integrated and multi-benefit system-wide solutions. Sac River GRR represents an enormous opportunity to leverage ongoing federal, state, and local planning efforts. So next slide. So what we're looking to do with this study between us and the Army, with DWR and the Army Corps of Engineers, is to leverage some of the existing work that's been done. And there's been a tremendous amount of work. There's been a Central Valley Flood Protection Plan by the state, which we've developed, which within that we have a basin-wide feasibility study. The locals have developed regional flood management plans, and the states also work to develop a conservation strategy to account for some of the ecosystem benefits needed. As well, what's currently going on is we have a Central Valley Integrated Flood Management Study, which again is between the state DWR, and the Central Valley Flood Protection Board, and it's in coordination with the Army Corps of Engineers. And this study takes into account similar area to the Sacramento River Flood Control Project. It's a watershed study, which gives us an understanding of what's happening. And this Sacramento River Flood Control Project, GRR, is a offshoot of that project. So that project's feeding us the information we need so that we can go out and get authorization and move this project forward. So with that, we are in a unique moment in history for the Central Valley flood planning, in which all these planning efforts are aligning. The moment is ripe for a system-wide, multi-purpose Army Corps feasibility study. So we're very hopeful of the success of this project and what it can do for us to actually get implementation of the system and to improve a system that's been more or less the same for the last 100 years. With that, Rhiannon, I'll take over.
Okay, let's account for the height difference. Hi, everyone. I'm Rhiannon Kaczarski. I'm the lead planner for the Corps of Engineers for the Sacramento River General Reevaluation Study. And I'm going to take you through the middle and through the end of the presentation and walk you through a little more of the details about the project as we know them today. So what you see before you is the SMART feasibility study process that the Corps follows for civil works planning studies. And without taking you through all the painful details of the process, the general good things to know are that we've been asked by Congress and our leaders in Washington to try to finish most of our studies within 3 years and $3 million. And within that process, we step through several phases of planning. So today, we find ourselves in the scoping phase. So we're at the very, very beginning and initiation of this brand new study. And you see that we're here with you because we're doing the public scoping for this project. So that's the first opportunity at which we come, join with the public, and get to hear your wonderful input and comments and ideas and about existing resources that might be out there that we could use to benefit the project. So we'll finish scoping, step through our first agency milestone, which we call the alternatives milestone. We'll then step into the phase for alternative formulation and analysis. And at the end of that phase, there'll be another moment in time where we come back to the public to get public comment and input formally, and we'll release our draft document for concurrent review with the public. And we also do many levels of internal review for policy, compliance, for legal review, and for agency technical review. So you can stay tuned to hear from us again, probably somewhere between late 2016 and the summer of 2017 with the draft of our plan. We then, after gaining agency endorsement of our draft recommendation, we will do feasibility level analysis on that recommendation. And when we complete that and we get permission from our DC headquarters to release our final draft report, we will come for the final review with the public and state and agencies to get final comment on our project. And we'll hopefully wrap everything up within about 3 years, targeting the summer of 2018. Okay, so the first thing we did after kicking off the study this past summer was to have our agency scoping meeting. So we huddled ourselves from the Army Corps, both at the district level, our regional division level, South Pacific Division, and also representatives of our headquarters office in DC, with our sponsors, both the Central Valley Flood Protection Board and the Department of Water Resources, and our agency counterparts for resources, such as NOAA Fisheries, our U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, California Department of Fish and Wildlife, and the California Natural Resources Agency. And we locked ourselves in a room for several days and looked at what our draft recommendations would be for the scope of the Sacramento River General Reevaluation. Next, please. So out of that meeting, we came up with some draft recommendations. So one of the first and most important is that we do want to revision the flood control project as originally envisioned in the early 1900s and authorized in 1917 for both flood risk management and ecosystem restoration. A lot has changed in the almost 100 years since this project was authorized. We are asking a lot of our system. We need a lot of benefits out of our watershed, and we know that today and want to incorporate those needs together in the project for the first time. Also, we talked about the study area. So you got to see the small version of the map. The large version is on the wall to your left over there. That is quite an area, the Sacramento River Basin, and it includes over 1,100 miles of levees and many other features such as weirs, bypasses, reservoirs, and so on. And so to fit that entire area within 3 years and $3 million seemed to be quite an ask of the study team. So one of our draft recommendations was that perhaps to keep within those parameters, we needed to look at least initially, a smaller portion of that study area, and then plan to do a second phase where we would look at the next piece. And so the logical piece that came up from our group as the draft piece to focus on for this initial effort would be the lower area of the Sacramento River Basin, followed by the mid and upper sections. And we also talked a lot and heard a lot from the locals during our field visit about really the challenges that are going on out there in terms of operating and maintaining this system, which is approaching 100 years old. And so we definitely want to keep in mind all of those concerns and very valid challenges that locals and operating entities are facing every day, and make sure that we're keeping the end in mind as we're planning, and making sure that we're planning for good long-term operations and maintenance of our system. So we find ourselves here in the public scoping, and we're so glad that you're able to join us this evening. So we kicked off scoping with issuing a notice of intent and a notice of preparation to both the Federal Register and the State Clearinghouse on October 23rd. And with that, we kicked off our 30-day public scoping period, which ends on November 23rd. So you're welcome to provide comment at any point during that period, either here today, in writing, by email, or by contacting us. And at the end of this presentation, we'll make sure you have the key contact information for the critical folks on our teams. And we are having 2 public scoping meetings. We have this one here today, and we're going to have another next week up in Marysville at the Yuba County Board of Supervisors office. So today, we want input from you. So we're looking for any input that you want to give, but specifically, perhaps you may want to give input on some of these items. So if you have any thoughts on the geographic planning area, on any revisions, additions, or deletions to our problems and opportunities, our objectives, constraints, plan formulation considerations, or measures, we'd love to hear about those. And if you're thinking, I don't know what those are yet, that's okay, because I'm going to present them to you in just a moment. So you will get more detail on that. And of course, on our environmental impact statement and environmental impact report that we anticipate preparing on its scope, its content, or things that you think need to be considered in there, please make sure that you do bring that input and comments to us. And I would just like to point out again our leads for NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act, and CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act, are Dan Artho for the Corps and Shelley Amrine from DWR. Okay, next please. So our preliminary look at environmental effects analysis, the things that we believe we're going to be looking into in our EIS, CIR include things like hydrology and hydraulics, water and air quality, biological resources and cultural resources, and many other things on the list, including noise, aesthetics, hazards and hazardous materials, and even things such as climate change. So if you have any comment to these anticipated effects that we plan to analyze, or if you believe we've missed something, please make sure and let us know. And of course, any other input that you might have on our project scope is more than welcome. And I'm going to look at Dan and Shelley now and ask, did I miss anything? Wonderful. Okay. So from there, I'm going to get into really my lane of expertise, which is planning and plan formulation. And so at our agency scoping meeting, we took our first crack at defining what the problems are that we believe exist in our study area that we need to tackle with this project. And so this is our first go at it, and we welcome your comment to these as well. So we see a high risk of flooding that threatens life and public safety, property, and critical infrastructure throughout this study area. The existing Sacramento River Flood Control Project levees are highly susceptible to erosion, as Corey mentioned earlier, and that will significantly increase future flood risk. So we need to deal with it. There's been a loss of 95% of historical riparian and associated floodplain habitats, and impaired natural riverine processes have reduced native species populations significantly. Other problems include the obstacles to fish passage and a loss of 95% of the historical fish rearing habitat in the study area, which has greatly reduced the native fish populations. And long-term operations, maintenance, repair, replacement, and rehabilitation are difficult, costly, and unsustainable. So you're thinking, oh my goodness, what problems? Well, we always want to also focus on what the opportunities are to capitalize upon what we can do to improve things. And so some additional opportunities that we see as we look at this system and revision it, we could possibly improve water supply in conjunction with any recommended project features. We could improve recreation in conjunction with any recommended project features we may come out with. And we may be able to reduce the need for continuous erosion protection and other long-term costs that have been present for the Sacramento River Flood Control Project, while at the same time restoring ecosystems that have been significantly degraded by that same project. Okay, so now we're going to get into the objectives of the study, at least in draft form. So we hope and would like to reduce the risks to life, public safety, and critical infrastructure in the study area. We would like to reduce the economic consequences that are associated with that flood risk, and we would like to increase system resiliency to adapt to future variability, things like climate change, development patterns, and the such. So for ecosystem, our draft objectives include improving the dynamic hydrologic and geomorphic processes within the study area, increasing and improving the quantity, diversity, quality, and connectivity of riverine and floodplain habitats, to contribute to the recovery and sustainability of native species populations and the overall biotic community diversity within the area, and increasing and improving the quantity, diversity, quality, and connectivity of native fisheries and rearing habitats. So this is a wonderful graphical representation and map that really get to the point of what's happened within the ecosystem. So on the right, you can see in green the historical distribution of riparian and wetland habitats. And then you can see in the two shades of purple what remains today. So that 95% decrease is very apparent. And then on your right, you can see in the bar chart the historic in blue fishery rearing habitat that existed in the study area, and then today's condition there in green in the very much shorter bars. So that really is the lay of the land out there in terms of the ecosystem. Next, please. So our preliminary objectives to achieve multiple benefits include enhance existing regulatory framework and/or approaches to better support long-term integrated management of the system, to increase water supply availability and reliability in conjunction with our other objectives, and to provide high-quality recreational and open space opportunities in conjunction with our other objectives. So we did identify, here to start off, a few constraints that we'll need to keep in mind as we're going through the planning process. We need to, of course, comply with all applicable federal and state laws, regulations, and policies. And any proposed actions that we propose must be maintainable and environmentally sustainable into the future. And we want to avoid increasing any bird strikes near airports in the study area, like our Sacramento International Airport, and that is a requirement from our Federal Aviation Administration. So other things, considerations to keep in mind in the planning process. We want to take operation and maintenance, resourcing, and accessibility needs into account and keep those in the back of our mind as we plan formulate. We want to aim for self-sustainability of ecosystem features that we might propose, and we want to make sure that we align with other planning efforts going on in the study area to capitalize upon synergies that we might have between our mutual projects. All right, so now we get into my favorite part, which is the tools in the toolbox. So what might we do about these problems and opportunities that we see before us? What tools are at our disposal to try to address those issues? So here's our toolbox, at least the draft set that we came up with for reducing flood risk in the study area. So we could do things like widen bypasses or create new bypasses. We could set back, improve, or put in new levees. We could optimize operation of weirs or reservoirs, even look at automation of those. We could look at non-structural things like coordinated emergency response plans, flood recovery plans, floodplain management plans, looking at flood proofing of homes or businesses or other structures, and we can look at things like relocation if things are in a very, very high-risk area. Or even things like putting in new structures like a new dam if necessary. So this is our range of tools that we could pull out of our toolbox to reduce flood risk in the study area. So we're definitely looking to you to tell us if we've left anything out, if you can think of another measure out there that might be used to affect change in the area. Please do bring that up to us and let us know. Next. Okay, so here's our toolbox for ecosystem restoration and how we might get at improving the situation in the ecosystem in the study area. So I'm not going to bore you with the whole list, but again, you can do things such as increase shaded riverine aquatic habitat, increase riparian habitat, remove barriers to channel migration so that the river can move and meander more. Look at laying back banks or even terracing floodplains. Look at removing non-native species, which can be a real serious issue for the native species. Looking at recreating channel meanders or reconnecting oxbows. looking at things like reservoir reoperation to help provide maybe water that the habitat needs or cold flows that fish need, and other things like maybe high ground refugia, among others. And so really that is sort of the draft set of recommendations that we came out with at our agency scoping. And so now we're really here today to hear from you to refine and improve these and figure out if we've got a good starting place from which to build, if we have a good foundation for the study. So next, Corey. So here we are. You are more than welcome to raise your hand in this forum if you feel at ease with talking in front of a group. If not, you're welcome to wait as we return to the open house scenario and come visit one of us personally. Or if you'd prefer to just email us from the comfort of your home or office or call us on the telephone, you're more than welcome to do that. And this is a contact list of some critical folks on the team. So you'll see for the Corps, we have public affairs there for you. We have Charles Austin, our project manager, myself, Rhiannon Kaczarski there, Dan Artho for environmental. And for DWR, we have Corey Lasso, who you heard from before me. Eric Sy, who isn't able to join us right now, but is on the team, is a critical part of the team. Mike Roberts, who is the environmental planning lead for DWR, and Shelley Emerine, who is here with us today for environmental and for CEQA. Okay. Okay. So with that, if you want to give a question or comment in this open format, you're welcome to do so, and I have my team of experts here to help me. Yes?
Your tool shed of ways to deal with flooding, I noticed there was dredging was nowhere on there.
Okay, great. That's a wonderful comment. So was everyone able to hear that? So for the tool chest, you said that...
The tool chest, yeah, dredging in the past has been one of the tool chests to reduce hindrance to flood flow, and it's not on your list.
Okay, that's a wonderful addition. So our note taker in the back, I'm just going to get a wink and a nod that we've got that. Okay, thank you so much. Would anyone else like to ask a question or give a comment in this forum? Don't be shy, there's no bad questions.
Actually, I had two questions. One, just curious if you've identified a boundary for the separation between the lower Sac bypass and the upper region. And then as far as engaging with local stakeholders on developing alternatives, is there a process for doing that beyond the scoping meeting? So.
Sure. Okay, so the two-part question. So in terms of the northern extent of what we would consider the lower, it would be consistent with the regional study, the basin-wide study for, I believe it's called Upper Delta, Lower Sac Upper Delta? Or Corey? It's consistent with the basin-wide study for that area, correct? So I believe it goes up to Fremont Weir. Go back to the map. Okay, so it's hard to see the weir here, but there is a weir, Fremont Weir, that exists right about here, and on my team, tell me if I'm pointing to the wrong area. But this is an impingement point for flow of water, so a natural, hydrologic and hydraulic break point. And so we were looking at considering from Fremont Weir all the way down to the Delta. Did that answer the first part of your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Including Knight's Landing.
Including Knight's Landing, yes. And for the second part of your question, in terms of alternatives development?
Yes, alternatives development and how local stakeholders can be engaged in helping formulate those alternatives.
Sure. Okay, so we're still looking at how we might want to do it depending on the stakeholder group that's interested in this project. But I'll give you an example from our watershed study. So for our Central Valley Integrated Flood Management Watershed Study, as we lovingly call CIVMS, we had a plan formulation charrette or stakeholder workshop in which we invited the folks on our mailing list and said, hey, if you would like to join us, roll up your sleeves for a day or two and help us to formulate alternatives, you're welcome to come and participate in that event. And so I imagine we may do something very similar for this project. And then, of course, we take those measures that you saw in the toolboxes, and we look at the on-the-ground situation across the study area and ask ourselves which tool in the toolbox might be the best to apply, and which are even feasible to apply in that given area. And we sort of focus it in that way. So usually we do some behind-the-scenes work and then come out and say, well, here's some ideas, here's some things we've come up with, and what do you think, and get your input. And it's an iterative process. So what I would say to you is, if you're interested in something like that, if you're interested in participating in future workshops, before you leave today, go and mark an X next to your name on the mailing list and indicate for me that you might like to be part of a future workshop, and I will make sure that you get an email about those events. Sound good?
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Questions or comments from anyone else?
I think we're all aware that there have been a lot of studies in this area: CalFed, Comp Study, Common Features, Natomas, West Safecut, GRR. What's the intention in terms of having new analysis, say for H&H, compared to integrating some of the other information that's already been accomplished?
Sure. So, Peter, since it's H&H, would you like to answer this one, or you want me to give it a shot?
So you're correct. There's been a lot of different studies, modeling, analysis, looking at historical stuff. So yeah, we'll try to use as much of the available information as possible. The DWR has gone through a pretty extensive hydrologic modeling analysis over the last 5 years or so, and writing on top of analysis that was done as part of the comp study in the early 2000s. So yeah, we'll try to use all of that information as possible. Yeah.
I will sum that up as, don't reinvent the wheel, but use the latest science and data. I think that's sort of what we have at heart. Right, guys? Yeah. Okay, others?
This actually is a comment on the flood risk reduction. The comment was made about dredging, but better channel and bypass maintenance in terms of dealing with either sedimentation in certain areas, but also managing for hydraulic roughness as opposed to just leaving it the way it is. It seems to be currently not a maintained facility in many cases, so benign neglect is a problem.
Okay. Thank you. And with our note taker, were you able to capture that? Okay, thank you. Wonderful comment. Anyone else? Going once, going twice. Sold. Okay. Well, with that, I will kick us back to our open house forum. So we'll have our experts manning our various stations around the room. I encourage you to come and visit our poster boards, at which you can learn more information about the study in the project area and the various laws and regulations that we'll be adhering to. And please feel free to come up to me if you have any questions about the presentation, or also to Corey. And we do have copies of the presentation, so if you'd like to take one home with you, you're more than welcome to do so. Thank you very much. Oh, Dan? Sure, Dan would like to say something.
Yeah, also, I just wanted to remind everybody, if you do have a comment, if you don't want to, give it to us up front or in person, feel free to fill out one of the comment cards and provide it to Randy in the back there, and we'll take it home and make sure we have it recorded as part of our database to keep track of comments, public comments. Again, that's probably the best way for us to make sure that we do record your comment and make sure we consider comments that you have, concerns that you have. Okay, thank you.
Yes, and another reminder, so if you're interested in future workshops, as the gentleman in the back was, please do make sure then that you go and mark an X next to your name before you leave, and we'll be sure to note that in our mailing list database and make sure that we let you know when those events are coming. Okay, well, with that, we'll go ahead and break to the open house and hope that you'll come and visit us at one of our many stations. Thank you.
most efficient way possible. So there's certain things that we can. So there could be.
So we're looking at all that, and by using, and part of the smart process is using the maximum amount of available information.
Inclusiveness, that the language that you mentioned in regards to, hey, you're not on this list, you would like to, but
So there you go. This is why no one knows what the project is, because no one knows what the project is.
Well, and that's, and of course, see, AB 52 reminds me that before you go public, you have to talk to the tribes.
Yes.
And I'm going to